It's Thursday, July 17th, 2025. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Grant Herms. Today on the show, a bad bill for Big Bird. The Senate passes a huge bill package that would effectively shut down public media, so PBS and NPR. It would also cut billions of dollars in foreign aid, and we'll talk about why that's likely illegal and could also turn up the heat in the internal fight in the Democratic Party. But first, make sure you're following or subscribe to Make It Make Sense with Grant Herms on whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications on YouTube if you're a watcher. Also, sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack. The most recent article about the cost of some of these cuts to just foreign aid is up right now for free as long as you're a subscriber. If you want to be a paid subscriber, it's just $5 a month and you'll get access to all sorts of great content just like that one that's up for free right now. If you don't want to do that, I totally get it, but please share the show on social media. It's Mims Newspod. That's MIMS Newspod, all one word on every platform. I am at Grant Herms on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Grant Herms TV on everything else. All right, let's get to the show. Hey, listener. You know what the show is all about breaking down the news in a way that actually makes sense. No spin, just real reporting and smart conversations. And as an audience, you're sharp, curious, and engaged. And I know that you value where you spend your time and money. So if you're a brand, an organization, or a cause that aligns with truth, trust, and just cutting through the noise, then we want to partner with you. Whether you're launching a new product, pushing a policy, or you just want to get your message in front of an audience that values insight over outrage, let's make it make sense together. For ad rates, sponsorship packages, and custom campaigns, you can email ads at matchbookmediapod.com. That's ADS at matchbookmediapod.com. Because the smartest conversations deserve the smartest partners. Okay, let's get on with the show. In the early morning hours, we are talking 2 a.m. this morning, the Senate passed what's called a rescission bill after a vote-a-rama. Again, that's literally what it's called. Senators propose and vote on a bunch of amendments to a bill, one after another, until they get to a final vote. The rescission bill is better described as a clawback bill. Essentially, it's at President Donald Trump's request, something we'll talk about in a second here. Republicans are calling Take-Backsies on $9 billion worth of funding that they themselves approved back in March. It's really hard to understate how rare this kind of a bill is. We haven't had one since 1992. That is 33 years ago. And it's rare because Congress usually doesn't approve funding to then pull the rug out like this, especially not in the same year. It makes it really hard for people who are supposed to receive federal funds to plan, and it sows a lot of distrust in Congress about whether they're going to keep their word on any of their funding. And that kind of distrust can cause nonprofits, businesses, entire industries even to retreat from investing in the United States or innovating here, which can have downstream effects on jobs and local economies. But I'm getting way ahead of myself here. The money that we are talking about here that was just taken back by the Senate was part of an agreement that Republicans struck with Democrats to avoid a full-scale government shutdown. And hang on to that thought because we'll come to it a little later. Now, the big things in this clawback bill are funding for public media and foreign aid. If you've heard anything about it, it's probably the public media part, because this bill does effectively eliminate funding for things like PBS and NPR. Now, public media as a whole, which includes NPR, PBS under their parent organization, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and another public radio company called Public Radio Exchange, or PRX, stand to lose about $1.1 billion in federal funding over the next 2 years. The entire federal budget is $6.75 trillion. So that funding for public media comes out to about 0.016%, or 16/10,000% of the overall U.S. budget. Now, federal funds, according to NPR, make up 70% of the money that local stations receive, but that money is vital to the health of overall public media. It provides partial funding for NPR, PBS, and local public stations in more than 1,500 locations across the country. As many as 250 are in rural America and function largely as the only source of local media, or maybe media in general, in places that don't have quality internet access. Losing those stations would also mean the broader umbrella of NPR and PBS would lose funding not just once, but twice. According to NPR, about 1% of its funding comes from federal dollars, but 30% comes from fees from member stations who pay back that money to NPR for national programming, like their flagship news shows or massive hits like This American Life or Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, or some of the Ken Burns documentaries we all know and love. But the cost is bigger than just entertainment. Here's the CEO of NPR talking about the dire consequences of that exact thing on CBS This Morning.
The primary impact of this potential rescission is going to hurt communities where they need support most, which are rural stations that serve communities that do not have access to other forms of local news, emergency reporting, emergency alerting.
Will local stations have to close?
Some will.
And she's right. If those stations close, that will mean entire areas of the country may be devoid of not just information, but also emergency warnings. For more than a decade, public broadcasting stations have partnered with federal, state, and local governments to send out what are known as wireless emergency alerts, or WEAs. Those are emergency alerts that are sent to your TVs and to your phones during severe weather. You've probably gotten a couple of those notifications here and there. The Corporation for Public Broadcasting says that last year, public media stations sent out more than 11,000 WEAs, and using public media systems in times of statewide emergencies are part of 20 different state emergency response plans. We saw some of those during the hurricane recovery in North Carolina, where the local NPR and PBS stations became lifelines for survivors. We saw them be lifelines for survivors during the California wildfires to help people get out of harm's way. And it's not just natural disasters, but they played crucial roles in getting information out during other kinds of emergencies or things that could quickly become emergencies. In Houston, for instance, the local public media can send encrypted information to first responders for security during big events like the Super Bowl or presidential debates. In Maine, local media allows law enforcement to use its broadcast signal to connect with local authorities during emergencies. And in Florida, the NPR station at the University of Miami is responsible for disseminating hurricane information before hurricanes hit. And in Alabama, the public media signal is considered the backbone of the state's emergency response and is the statewide hub for Amber Alerts, the things that we use to track and find missing kids. And those are just a few examples in a few states. So if this is a vital resource for many Americans, especially when it comes to emergencies, and one that barely costs us anything, why get rid of it? Well, the White House and many Republicans say NPR has a liberal bias and therefore doesn't deserve federal funding. In an executive order earlier this year, Trump ordered all federal agencies to stop funds to NPR and PBS, something that I'll talk about a little later because it is likely illegal. Now, does NPR have a liberal bias? It's hard to tell what Republicans specifically mean by that. The definition, if you ask them, does tend to shift. But by most accounts, NPR radio stations do tend to cover more issues that liberal-leaning voters would care about, and they tend to have on guests from universities or think tanks to talk about specific issues that conservatives find to be too liberal. But overall, bias rating scales put NPR just left of the middle, but still incredibly reliable. But that's just NPR. A lot of people like public media, and when you ask them, more say that they don't want it to be funded than those that say they do. A new Pew study found that 43% of Americans want public media to remain funded, with 24% saying they don't, though a third of Americans say that they aren't sure. But at this moment, it does seem like Trump will get his way on this piece of this bill. Now, the other major part of this take-back bill is the money being taken away from foreign aid. Now, Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency closed down USAID, the foreign aid organization that was part of the State Department, but that left about $8 billion in funding that was meant to help feed starving people, including children, prevent and treat diseases, and help countries build new democracies and economies after conflicts. I talked about this in this most recent Substack this week, which is up for free right now, but just as a quick run-through, USAID, by law, has to send out, or had to send out, at least 2.5 million metric tons of food to foreign countries around the world, according to a congressional report from 2021. That cost the U.S. taxpayer about $3.3 billion a year. And this year, we learned that $450 million worth of that food is being left to rot, including about 500 tons that will need to be incinerated in the coming weeks because it's set to expire. Now, that food cost us more than $800,000 worth of calorie-dense biscuits that were meant to feed 1.5 million starving kids under the age of 5. And because USAID was shut down, those kids never got those biscuits, and now they never will. The money Republicans are clawing back in this bill is also meant to prevent diseases. We're talking 9.5 million more malaria infections this year alone that will happen because this money isn't there. It's a disease that can be fatal within 24 hours if it's left untreated, and it's pretty easy to treat. We'll see a rise in HIV, pneumonia, and tuberculosis infections without this money that, according to the Boston University Impact Tracker, which has been keeping track of the human cost of losing foreign aid funding, 363,000 people have already died from funding cuts. And a study from the Lancet Medical Journal done this year found that 14 million more people will be dead by 2030 who wouldn't have died if this funding would have stayed in place, including 4.5 million children. And those same researchers found that between 2001 and 2021, USAID likely saved 91 million lives. It will also cost us around $6 billion to fully pull foreign aid money from these programs. So instead of using the $8 billion we've already funded with tax money, we'll have to spend another $6 billion to not spend it, which seems sort of backwards. And again, like public media cuts, foreign aid accounts for a pittance of the overall federal budget, around 1% according to the Center for a Responsible Federal Budget. And for the average American, that comes out to a measly $64 a year. So essentially, life-saving food and medical treatment for what is the same cost as an impromptu run to Target on your way home from work. And the thing is, funding food and health aid is also popular. A poll from Pew Research done this year found 83% of Americans say they want to keep funding foreign food aid. 71% said the same for medical and health funding. And when it came to supporting less tangible ideas like economic or political development, 68% of Americans said they supported supporting economic growth in other countries, and 61% said they supported helping countries build democracies. So what these things are funding is wildly popular when you ask American people about the specifics. And the thing is, with these cuts, Republican senators who still voted for them know they're going to have to fix these things down the line and know that they're popular. Here's outgoing North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis talking about this last night.
I suspect we're going to find out there are some things that we're going to regret, some second and third order effects, and I suspect that when we do, we'll have to come back and fix it. Similar to what I'm trying to do with the bill I voted against a couple of weeks ago, the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, that I think we're going to have to go back and work on.
And if you heard that and you're thinking, why would we want to cause a problem we'll have to fix later? Why not just fix that problem now? That's the same question a lot of members of Congress are asking right now. It's a lot of what the senators who voted for this bill asked. It's a lot of what Republicans in the House will be asking, even if they'll be voting yes for this at some point tonight or maybe early in the morning on Friday. And the answer is they're going to vote for it because Trump wants these cuts. And now the thing is that if they do that, this is another example of Congress giving over more power to the president. There's a law that got passed in the 1970s called the Impoundment Control Act. You don't need to know exactly what that means. What it does mean, though, is that it doubles down on what's already in the Constitution that says it's the president's job to spend the money the way Congress outlines it in law. The president does not have the ability to spend or not spend money in a way that Congress didn't intend. But that's exactly what Trump did. By ordering funding to be stopped to public media and foreign aid, he essentially refused to follow the law. And then the way this bill came about is because Congress then had to create a new bill to take back money they originally said had to be spent because the president is refusing to spend it, even though it was law they wrote. So instead of pushing back, what we're seeing is Congress, again, laying down and letting the White House roll right over their constitutional powers. Now, finally, I said it at the beginning, this could also be bad for Democrats, and that's because this funding was part of a deal that specifically Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer struck with Republicans back in March to avoid a government shutdown. He was roundly criticized for making that deal because it was seen as caving to the GOP without getting anything in return, like funding guarantees. And at the time, it was the thing that really inflamed fighting between the younger part of the Democratic Party that wants to change and the old guard who still believes that they can trust and work with Republicans. And this bill, which will likely pass the House, will only make that Democratic Party fighting even worse. And you can expect over the weekend here to hear a lot of I told you so's coming from those younger members of the Democratic Party. And it might even lead to more calls for Chuck Schumer to step aside as the leader, effectively the overarching leader of the Democratic Party right now. So that brings us to where things stand on this Take-Backsies bill. If it doesn't get passed by tomorrow, the funding has to go through. The bill is currently in the House, where it is expected to get Republican changes and support, but Democrats say they're going to try to slow things down as much as they can to run out the clock, including putting up amendments that would require the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files. Now, those amendments won't pass, but it will force Republicans to again look like they're protecting accused pedophiles who might be in those files, something that Republicans for years have said that they do not want to protect. Now, as I'm recording, the bill has yet to pass the House, and any changes would need to go back to the Senate before this will land on the president's desk before the weekend. So we can, for sure, expect another very late night on Capitol Hill, which means I will be up watching all of this tonight so you can keep following along, and I might have a different bonus episode depending on what happens tomorrow. And because I said tomorrow, that is it for today's episode. Please rate and review the show, whatever podcast app you listen to it on. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications on YouTube so you don't miss out on any new videos. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack. You can get brand new bonus content, including some stories that I'm really excited about that I'll be dropping next week. It is just $5 a month to get access to those stories. And if you don't want to do that, as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims Newspod. That's MIMS Newspod, all one word on every platform. I am at Grant Herms on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Grant Herms TV on everything else. You can tag me there. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Herms, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.